My name is Amelia Hart. I'm 24 years old, and I learned the meaning of betrayal before I ever learned what independence felt like. It started with a letter, one of those thick envelopes from the university that feels heavy enough to carry a new life inside it. I remember the day vividly. The smell of cut grass from our front yard, the sound of my mom's radio in the kitchen, and the nervous flutter in my chest as I tore it open. Congratulations, Amelia Hart. You have been accepted. Those words glowed off the page like sunlight. I screamed, jumped, spun around the living room until my mom came running, wiping her hands on a towel. She hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. You did it, baby, she said. All those nights studying paid off. Behind her, my brother Ethan leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, a half-smile tugging at his lips. Well, he said, looks like our little overachievers leaving the nest. It didn't sound like a compliment, but I ignored it. He'd always been that way, charming when he wanted something, dismissive when he didn't. He was 27 then, still living at home, working part-time at a car dealership and full-time at avoiding responsibility. Still, he was my brother. I loved him. When Dad passed away 3 years before, Mom had struggled to keep things together. We didn't have much, but Dad had left a savings account, a college fund in my name. It was his dream for me to go to university, to become the first Hart to earn a degree. That fund was the reason I didn't panic every time the subject of tuition came up. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to believe I could actually make it. A week after my acceptance letter arrived, I went to the bank to start the paperwork for the tuition deposit. I still remember the smell of the pen ink, the soft click of my shoes on the tile floor, the hum of the air conditioner. Then the teller looked up, frowning. I'm sorry, she said. Are you sure this is the correct account number? My stomach dropped. Yes, it's my college account, under Amelia Hart. She typed again, slower. It looks like the account was closed 2 months ago. I felt my face go cold. That's not possible. She showed me the screen. My name. My father's old fund. A withdrawal of everything, every single dollar, transferred to a new account. Under Ethan Hart. The world went quiet. When I got home, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock the door. Mom was at the sink, humming. I said his name once, just once, and he came out of his room, still in his pajamas, holding his phone. Where's my college fund, Ethan? He blinked. What? Don't play stupid with me. The bank said you closed the account. You took everything. His face didn't even change. Relax. I needed it. I'll pay it back. Needed it. My voice cracked. That money was for my tuition. For my future. He rolled his eyes. It's just money, Mel. I had an investment opportunity, a friend's startup. It's temporary. I couldn't breathe. You stole from Dad. From me. That's when Mom walked in, drying her hands. What's going on? I turned to her, desperate. Mom, he took the money. The fund Dad left me. It's gone. She froze. Her eyes darted between us. For a moment, I thought she'd finally see him the way I did, selfish, manipulative, untrustworthy. But instead, she sighed. Ethan, tell me you'll give it back. He shrugged. I said I would. Then it's settled, she said. We're family. We don't fight over money. That sentence, we don't fight over money, burned into me like acid. It meant, Ethan is forgiven. It meant, you'll just have to deal with it. I walked to my room, slammed the door, and screamed into my pillow until my throat hurt. The next morning, I checked the account again, still empty. I emailed the university, explained that I needed an extension for my tuition payment. They gave me a week to come up with what my brother had taken. I begged him. I cried. He ignored me. One night I found him in the living room, watching TV, his phone lighting up with text messages. I grabbed the remote and turned off the screen. Please, Ethan, I said quietly. That money was all I had. I can't even apply for aid now. They think I still have the fund. Just please, give me something back. He looked up, annoyed. You'll thank me later when this investment pays off. An investment? In what? He smirked. Crypto. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe how surreal it sounded. You risked my entire education on crypto? He shrugged. It's the future. That was the night something inside me broke, the last thread of trust. I packed my bags 2 days later. I didn't have a plan. I just knew I couldn't stay in that house and pretend I wasn't drowning in resentment. I found a tiny apartment near campus, a single room, cracked walls, a kitchenette that buzzed when you turned on the light. I took 2 part-time jobs, mornings at a cafe and nights cleaning offices. I slept 4 hours a night, sometimes less. But I didn't drop out. Every time exhaustion whispered, "You can't do this," I heard my brother's voice instead, that smug, dismissive tone. "It's just money." So I worked harder. I became the girl who always sat in the front row, who color-coded her notes, who turned in assignments early. Professors started noticing. One of them, Professor Latham, my literature instructor, asked one day after class, "Amelia, how do you manage to stay this focused?" I smiled, though it didn't reach my eyes. Because failure isn't an option. He nodded slowly, as if he understood more than I said. That first year was brutal. I skipped meals, rationed groceries, and sometimes studied in the library just to stay warm. When I couldn't afford textbooks, I borrowed or photographed them page by page. Mom called occasionally, asking if I'd spoken to Ethan. I always said no. She'd sigh, say he wasn't doing well either. The investment had gone south. I wanted to feel pity, but I couldn't. Not anymore. The months blurred together, work, study, exhaustion. But slowly, the grades came in. Straight A's. Scholarships followed. A professor recommended me for a research grant. For the first time, I started to breathe again. Then, one afternoon in my 3rd year, I got an email from the dean's office. Subject: Graduation Honors Review. I opened it, heart pounding. "You have been shortlisted for Valedictorian." For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. My hands covered my mouth as tears spilled over. It wasn't just about grades. It was about every night I cried myself to sleep, every shift I worked until my legs shook, every time I refused to quit. That evening, I walked to the river near campus, my quiet spot, and sat under the bridge. I took off my silver bracelet, the one Dad had given me before he passed, and whispered, "I did it, Dad." Then, out of habit, I checked my phone. A message notification blinked from an unknown number. "Ethan, hey. Can we talk?" I stared at it until the screen went dark. Part of me wanted to delete it. The other part, the little sister who still wanted her big brother to apologize, couldn't. After a long pause, I typed back one word. "Why?" He replied, "I need help." And just like that, everything I'd built, all the distance, all the hard-earned calm, began to tremble again. When I saw Ethan's name light up on my phone, every nerve in my body felt like it had been struck. 3 years. 3 years of silence, and he thought he could just type, "I need help," like nothing had happened. I didn't reply. I couldn't. I turned off the phone and sat there by the river until the sky turned orange and the streetlights blinked awake. The water shimmered in front of me, calm, steady, unbothered, and I wished I could be that still. But when I got home that night, the words kept replaying in my head. I need help. Help with what? His so-called investment? His guilt? Or was it just another manipulation? I tossed and turned all night, sleep refusing to come. By morning, I gave in. I texted back, "Where are you?" The response came fast. "Mom's place. Please just come." For a moment, I considered blocking him. Then I thought of Mom, how she'd always been caught between us, pretending peace existed where it never did. I couldn't let her get dragged into another storm. So, after my afternoon class, I took the train back to the small town I once swore I'd never return to. The ride felt endless. I kept watching my reflection in the train window, same brown hair, same tired eyes, but the girl staring back looked older, harder, like someone who'd built armor out of heartbreak. When I stepped onto the platform, the air smelled like rain and nostalgia. The town hadn't changed much. The same old bakery on the corner, the same cracked sidewalks, the same tired quiet. Mom's house came into view, paint peeling a little more, wind chimes tangled together. My stomach knotted. When I opened the door, the familiar scent of her cinnamon candles hit me. Then I saw him. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, head in his hands. He looked smaller. The confident posture I remembered was gone. His hair was messy, his beard uneven. The man who'd once bragged about investments looked like he'd invested in nothing but regret. Mom was at the stove, stirring soup. When she saw me, she smiled softly, as if she'd been expecting this. "You came." I nodded, eyes still on him. "What's going on?" Ethan looked up slowly. His eyes were bloodshot. "Hey, Mel." I flinched at the nickname. No one had called me that in years. "Why am I here, Ethan?" He rubbed his temples. "I messed up. Again." I crossed my arms. "You don't say." He sighed, looking away. The startup collapsed. I lost everything. The investors are threatening to sue. I can't even pay rent. A bitter laugh escaped me. "You mean the investors you used my money to impress?" He didn't answer. I took a step closer, my voice low. "You destroyed my future, Ethan. Do you have any idea what I went through because of you?" His voice cracked. "I do now. And I'm sorry." The words I'd waited years to hear hung in the air, fragile, hesitant, almost meaningless. I wanted them to matter, but they didn't. Not after all the nights I'd cried, the hunger, the exhaustion, the humiliation. I looked at Mom, who was pretending to be busy at the stove. "You knew he was calling me, didn't you?" She turned, guilt flickering in her eyes. "He's your brother, Amelia. He's made mistakes, but he's still family." I shook my head. "You always say that. You said it when he took Dad's car without asking. When he dropped out. When he stole the fund. How many mistakes does it take before you stop calling them mistakes?" Tears welled in her eyes, but she stayed silent. I turned back to Ethan. "So, what do you want from me?"
Money?
"Forgiveness." He looked up, desperate. "Neither. Just a chance. You're the only one doing well now. I thought maybe you could talk to your university, help me get a job there, anything. I just need something steady to start over." I stared at him in disbelief. "You want me to help you?" He nodded. "You're the only one who hasn't given up on me." I let out a bitter laugh.
Oh, Ethan.
"You don't get it. I did give up on you. Years ago." The room fell silent except for the faint bubbling of Mom's soup. Then he whispered, "You hate me." I looked at him, my heart heavy.
No.
"I stopped hating you when I realized hate meant I still cared." He dropped his gaze, shame painting his face. "You have every right to hate me. But, Mel, I've changed." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But then I noticed the small lies still clinging to him. The twitch in his jaw, the restless fingers tapping the table, the subtle defensiveness.
He hadn't changed.
He'd just gotten better at sounding sorry. "I have to go," I said finally. "Amelia, please." "No," my voice shook, but I stood firm. "You made your choices. And I made mine. I don't owe you my success." As I turned to leave, he said something that froze me in my tracks. "You think you did it all on your own?" I looked back. "What's that supposed to mean?" He gave a faint smirk, that same smug twist of his mouth I remembered from years ago. "You think you got those scholarships and grants just because you're smart? You don't even know half the story." My pulse quickened. "What are you talking about?" He leaned back in his chair. "Mom never told you. When your first-year tuition deadline hit and you didn't have the money, someone covered it. I was the one who went to the university. I begged them to let you stay enrolled until your scholarships kicked in." I blinked. "You expect me to thank you for that?" He shrugged. "Just saying, maybe I'm not the villain you make me out to be." The nerve of him. I stepped closer, my voice trembling with anger. "You're right. You're not a villain. Villains at least have a plan. You're just a coward who hides behind family while you ruin everyone around you." His smirk vanished. "You've changed." "Good." I grabbed my bag. Because the old me would have cried. The new me doesn't. As I walked out, I heard Mom's voice behind me, soft and pleading. "Amelia, please. Don't go like this. He's still your brother." I paused at the door.
No, Mom.
He's your son. He stopped being my brother the day he stole my future. I didn't look back. Outside, the rain had started again, soft, steady, cleansing. I stood there for a long time, letting it soak through my coat. I wanted to scream, to cry, but instead I laughed, a shaky, hollow laugh that felt like letting go. On the train back to campus, I replayed every word he'd said. You think you did it all on your own? It shouldn't have bothered me, but it did. Not because I believed him, but because part of me wanted him to be telling the truth. Part of me wanted to think he had at least one decent act buried beneath the wreckage of who he'd become. When I got back to my apartment, I found an email waiting for me from the dean's office. Subject: Final selection, commencement ceremony speech. I opened it with trembling hands. Congratulations, Amelia Hart. You have been selected as valedictorian for the class of 2024. I stared at the words until they blurred. The irony hit me like a wave. The girl who almost didn't afford her first semester was now graduating at the top of her class. I wanted to call Mom. I wanted to share it, but I couldn't, because the one person who should have been proud of me, Dad, wasn't there. And the one who'd tried to destroy me was begging for a job. Instead, I sat at my desk, opened a blank page, and began writing my graduation speech. The first line came easy. Sometimes the people who break us are the same ones who teach us how to stand again. As the words flowed, I felt something shift, the bitterness softening into something else. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But clarity. I realized that revenge didn't always mean destruction. Sometimes, the best revenge was living in the success they said you'd never reach. By the time I finished, dawn had broken. The city outside was quiet, golden light spilling through my window. I looked at the email again, smiled faintly, and whispered, "You'll hear my name again, Ethan. Just not in the way you expect." The weeks leading up to graduation passed like a blur of sleepless nights and unfinished closure. Between final exams, interviews, and endless congratulations from professors, my phone never stopped buzzing. Emails, invitations, recognition. For the first time in years, my name, Amelia Hart, was spoken with admiration, not pity. But beneath all the praise, something felt off. Success had come, but peace hadn't followed. Every night, I'd read over my speech, adjusting words that sounded too polished, too safe. I didn't want to write another textbook message about hard work or gratitude. I wanted honesty. I wanted to speak to every student who had ever been betrayed by someone they trusted. And maybe deep down, I wanted him to hear it too.
Ethan.
He hadn't called again since that day at Mom's house. I told myself I didn't care. But part of me still checked my phone sometimes, wondering if he'd text. If he'd show up at graduation. If he even knew I'd made it. He didn't. Of course he didn't. But life, I was learning, had a cruel sense of timing. It was 2 days before graduation when I found him again. I had stayed late at the university library, working on a final essay I'd volunteered to publish for the Honors Journal. The campus was quiet, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. When I stepped outside, I saw someone sitting on the bench across the quad, head lowered, hood up. Something about the stillness of that figure made my stomach twist. When he looked up, my breath caught. It was Ethan. He looked nothing like the man I'd grown up with. His cheeks were hollow, his clothes wrinkled, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep or something darker. "Hey," he said softly. I froze halfway across the courtyard. "What are you doing here?" He stood, rubbing the back of his neck. "I needed to see you." "How did you even find me?" "Mom told me you were graduating. Said you might be here late."
Of course she did.
"I'm not doing this again," I said, turning away. "Wait." His voice cracked. I just wanted to see you before everything happens." "Before you?" "Before I what?" I snapped. "Before I finally get something you can't take from me?" He flinched like I'd slapped him. "That's not fair." I laughed bitterly. "Fair? You emptied my future and called it an investment. You left me with nothing, Ethan." "I know," he whispered. "And I'm sorry. But I'm trying to fix things." "By doing what?" "Showing up uninvited." He hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket. My heart skipped for a second, but he only pulled out a folded check. I got some money back from the lawsuit. From the investors. It's not much, but it's something. I want you to have it. I stared at it, at the tiny white rectangle that felt like a bandage on a wound years too deep to heal. How much? 5,000. I almost laughed. You think that makes us even? He shook his head.
No.
Nothing ever will. But I can start somewhere. I didn't take it. I couldn't.
Keep it, I said.
You'll need it more than I ever will.
His shoulders sagged.
You hate me. No, I said quietly. You don't get that power anymore. He sat back down on the bench, defeated. You've changed so much. You used to look at me like I could do anything. Now you look at me like I'm a stranger. I met his eyes. That's because you are.
He didn't argue.
Just sat there, staring at the ground, until I finally turned to leave. Amelia, he called out, voice shaking. Do you ever think about Dad? That stopped me cold. Every day, I said. Do you think he'd be proud of me? I turned, eyes stinging. Not like this. He nodded slowly, like he already knew the answer. He'd be proud of you, though. And for the first time in years, his voice didn't sound manipulative or smug, just hollow. I left without another word. That night, I couldn't sleep. His words kept echoing in my mind. Do you think he'd be proud of me? I remembered when we were kids, Dad would take us fishing on weekends. Ethan always caught the biggest fish, the fastest, loudest, most confident. I'd sit next to him, quiet, content just to be there. When Dad passed, I think Ethan lost more than a parent. He lost the only person who ever saw potential in him. And maybe that was why he tried to take mine. Still, empathy didn't erase what he'd done. By morning, I decided I wouldn't let him haunt my graduation. I wouldn't let bitterness stain what I'd worked so hard for. The ceremony day came with clear skies, the kind of perfect weather that felt too good to be real. Students in blue gowns filled the quad, families waving from rows of white chairs. The smell of flowers and sunscreen hung in the air. I stood backstage, clutching the note cards of my speech, my heart racing. Amelia Hart, a staff member called. You're next. I nodded, exhaling slowly. When I stepped onto the stage, the applause hit me like a wave. Hundreds of faces, all turned toward me. Professors, students, families, my mother in the third row with tears in her eyes. And then, I saw him, Ethan, standing at the back, by the fence, hands shoved in his pockets, eyes locked on me. For a moment, everything blurred. The noise, the crowd, the sunshine, all fading until it was just the two of us. The dean's voice cut through. Please welcome this year's valedictorian, Ms. Amelia Hart. Applause again. My legs carried me to the podium before my mind caught up. I looked down at my speech. The neat words I'd rehearsed suddenly felt wrong, sterile, safe, forgettable. I looked up, and then I tore the speech in half. Gasps rippled through the audience. I gripped the podium and spoke from the only place that mattered, the truth. When I started this journey, I thought success meant perfection. I thought it meant following every rule, checking every box. But life doesn't hand you success. It tests how badly you want it. It takes from you. Sometimes, it takes the people you love most. My voice shook, but I didn't stop. There was a time I almost didn't make it here. Someone I trusted took something that wasn't his to take. My future, my security. But what he didn't realize was that money can't buy resilience. Pain can't erase purpose. And betrayal can't define who we become. The crowd was silent, every eye fixed on me. I glanced toward the back. Ethan was still there, motionless, expression unreadable. I learned that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's choosing peace over poison. And sometimes, the loudest revenge is quiet success. The dean smiled faintly behind me. My mom was crying openly now. I took a deep breath. To everyone out there fighting silent battles, this moment isn't just mine. It's yours too. For every night you thought you'd break and didn't. For every time you were counted out and kept going. This is for you. The applause began softly, then grew louder, thunderous, overwhelming. I stepped back, heart pounding, tears spilling over as I smiled through them. As I walked off stage, a dozen hands reached out to shake mine, professors and students whispering congratulations. But I barely heard them. I turned once more toward the back of the field. Ethan was gone. For a second, I wondered if I'd imagined him. But when I reached my seat, I noticed something tucked inside my program. A folded note. In his handwriting. "You were right. I'm not the villain. I'm just lost. But watching you up there, I think maybe I finally saw the person Dad wanted both of us to be. I'm proud of you, little sister." My throat tightened. I didn't know if he'd left it on my chair or slipped it to Mom, but it didn't matter. For the first time, I didn't feel anger when I thought of him. Just distance.
And peace.
After the ceremony, as the sun began to set, I walked alone to the edge of the quad. Students were laughing, taking pictures, tossing caps into the air. I pulled out the check he tried to give me, the one I hadn't taken. Somewhere between chaos and closure, he'd slipped it into my graduation program again. This time, I didn't rip it. I didn't cash it either. I folded it carefully and tucked it into my journal, a reminder not of what he'd taken, but of how far I'd come without him. That night, lying in bed, I whispered to the darkness, "You were right, Dad. I did it." And for once, I didn't have to add, "despite him." I did it for me. Graduation came and went, but the applause still echoed in my mind for weeks afterward. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see the sunlight glinting off that stage, hear the dean calling my name, feel the trembling pride in my mother's hug. For a while, it almost felt like freedom, like I'd finally escaped everything Ethan had taken from me. But peace, I've learned, is never permanent. It's something you have to fight for over and over again. After graduation, I stayed in the city. I found a small studio apartment, one of those cozy, overpriced places with peeling paint and a window that opened just enough to hear the world below. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I started working at a publishing firm downtown, an internship at first, then a permanent position after 3 months. The pay was decent, the hours long, but I loved it. Editing manuscripts felt like stitching stories back together, and in some way, I think I was still trying to stitch myself back together too. The company's senior editor, a woman named Linda, took me under her wing. She had that kind of presence that could fill a room, sharp eyes, soft voice, the kind of confidence that only comes from surviving 100 storms. "You've got grit," she told me one evening, staying late as we proofread a novel together. "Don't lose it. The world likes to test people who've already been tested enough." I smiled faintly. "It already has." She looked at me, curious, but didn't pry. That was the thing about strong women. They recognized pain, but never demanded its story. Months passed. I got promoted to assistant editor. Mom came to visit. We had dinner, laughed a little, even talked about Ethan, just enough for me to know he was still around, but not enough for me to care.
"He's living out of town now," she said.
"Trying to get his life together." "Good for him," I replied flatly. I meant it, sort of. I didn't wish him misery. I just didn't want him anywhere near my peace. But fate, or irony, or whatever cruel storyteller runs this universe, had other plans. It was a gray Tuesday morning when I saw him again. I was on my way to the firm, balancing my coffee, umbrella, and manuscript folder, when someone called my name across the street. "Amelia." I froze. He was standing by the bus stop, unshaven, soaked from the rain, holding a folded newspaper. His clothes were cleaner this time, but his face still carried that same mix of regret and hope. "Ethan," I said, barely above a whisper. He jogged across the street, nearly slipping on the wet pavement. "I didn't think you'd stop." I almost didn't. He gave a small, awkward laugh. "Fair enough." For a moment, we just stood there under my umbrella, raindrops tapping the fabric like a soft drumbeat. "You look different," he said finally.
"Happy."
"I am," I replied. "Why are you here?"
"I got a job," he said.
"At a tech company not far from here. They're small, but they're giving me a chance." "That's good," I said carefully. "Really?" He nodded, stuffing his hands in his pockets. "I just wanted to tell you in person. I figured you should know." "I don't need to know. I said gently. You don't owe me updates. I do, he said, his voice tightening. I owe you everything. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted to say it again. I'm sorry. I looked at him, really looked, and realized that for the first time his apology didn't sound rehearsed. It wasn't wrapped in excuses or desperation. It was quiet, raw, human. Okay, I said softly. Thank you. He nodded, eyes glistening. I saw the video of your speech online. The part about betrayal and resilience. You were amazing. I smiled faintly. You watched it? Twice, he said. I think Dad would have cried. Something in my chest loosened at that. We stood in silence for a while, the rain easing into drizzle. Then he reached into his pocket and handed me something, a small silver keychain shaped like a book. I saw it at a thrift shop, he said. Thought of you. I hesitated before taking it. It was simple, a little worn, but strangely beautiful. Thanks, I murmured. He smiled weakly. Anyway, I should get going. I just wanted to say congrats again and that I'm proud of you. I nodded, unsure of what to say. When he walked away, I waited for the bitterness to follow, the old anger, the sting of what he'd taken. But it didn't come. Just an ache. A quiet, lingering ache that wasn't hate anymore. Maybe that was what healing really felt like. Not joy, not closure, just the absence of rage. That night, I placed the keychain on my desk next to Dad's bracelet. For once, I didn't feel like the little sister chasing her brother's shadow. I felt like my own person. Life moved forward. The months turned into a year. Ethan and I exchanged short messages every now and then, polite, distant, safe. Happy birthday. Congrats on the promotion. Hope you're doing okay. And then one Friday afternoon, everything changed again. I was in the middle of a meeting when my phone buzzed. The caller ID said Mom. I silenced it. She rarely called during work. Then it buzzed again. And again. Something inside me tightened. I excused myself, stepping into the hallway to answer. Hey, Mom. Her voice was trembling. Amelia, honey. It's Ethan. My stomach dropped. What happened? He collapsed at work. They think it's his heart. I gripped the wall for balance. Where is he? St. Mary's Hospital. They're running tests. They said it's serious. My voice barely worked. I'm coming. The cab ride felt endless. Every red light, every delay felt like an eternity. When I finally reached the hospital, Mom was in the waiting room, her face pale and wet with tears. She hugged me tightly. He's stable, but the doctor said he's been under a lot of stress. He hasn't been eating right, hasn't been sleeping. I sat down beside her, trying to breathe. Can we see him? Soon. The hours crawled. The smell of disinfectant, the low hum of machines, it all felt surreal. Finally, a nurse called our name. When I walked into his room, my throat tightened. Ethan looked fragile. Tubes, monitors, pale skin against white sheets. But when he opened his eyes and saw me, he smiled weakly. Hey, Mel, he whispered. I pulled up a chair, blinking back tears. You scared us. Guess my body decided to reboot, he said faintly. Even in a hospital bed, he tried to joke. I wanted to be angry, to tell him this was his pattern, to self-destruct until someone rescued him. But I couldn't. Not this time. I'm glad you're okay, I said quietly. He nodded, eyes glassy. You know, when I took that money years ago, I thought I was saving myself. But all I did was lose everything that mattered. I swallowed hard. You can still fix it. Maybe, he said, a ghost of a smile. But I think you already did. The words hit deeper than he could have known. He closed his eyes, exhausted. I sat there, holding his hand, and for the first time since I was 17, I didn't see the thief, the liar, the brother who ruined me. I saw the boy who used to protect me from bullies, who used to make me laugh when Dad worked late, who used to promise we'd both make something of ourselves. That night, I stayed by his side. I wrote emails for work, graded edits, and occasionally looked up to make sure he was still breathing. It felt strange, like the universe had reset us back to something simple. Sibling love, stripped of expectation. The next morning, he woke up stronger. You stayed? I smiled faintly. Someone had to make sure you didn't wander off with hospital equipment. He chuckled weakly. Thanks. As I left later that day, he squeezed my hand. Amelia, don't let the world harden you. You're better than that. For once, it didn't sound like advice. It sounded like apology. Walking out into the morning light, I realized something I hadn't understood before. Forgiveness isn't about excusing what someone did. It's about deciding that their choices no longer control your peace. And as the city stretched awake around me, cars honking, sunlight catching on skyscraper glass, I finally understood that my story wasn't about what Ethan took.
It was about what I built anyway.
2 weeks after Ethan's heart scare, the world seemed to slow down. Work felt different. I moved through days with an odd, restless quiet in me, as if something had shifted and I couldn't quite name it. He recovered faster than anyone expected. Mom said the doctors were amazed. I said it was the universe giving him another chance. For once, he seemed to believe it. We talked more in those weeks than we had in years. Short calls, simple messages. Take your vitamins, I'd text. Bossy as ever, he'd reply. It was strange how normal conversation felt like rediscovering a language I used to speak fluently and then forgot. One Sunday morning, Mom called. Her voice was soft, almost nervous. Sweetheart, when you're free, could you come by the house? There's something I need to show you. I drove there after work, expecting maybe old photos or the box of my graduation memorabilia she kept meaning to give me. But when I walked into the living room, the air felt heavy. Mom was sitting at the coffee table with a brown envelope in her hands, the kind that looked like it had been through too many years and too many secrets. What's that? I asked. She took a long breath. It's your father's will. I blinked. His will? I thought we already handled all that after he passed. Her fingers trembled as she slid the papers toward me. I found another copy. It was tucked behind some documents in his old desk. This one has an addendum I didn't remember seeing before. I unfolded the paper. The handwriting was unmistakably Dad's, steady, careful, precise. It read, if anything should happen to me, I leave the remaining college fund to be managed jointly by my son, Ethan, until Amelia reaches legal age to attend university. Ethan is to ensure the fund remains untouched for its intended purpose. I read the line twice before looking up. Managed jointly by my son? What does that even mean? Mom's eyes were glossy. It means your father trusted him to help. He didn't expect me to handle the finances alone. Ethan was supposed to be a temporary guardian of that account. My pulse quickened. So, he was allowed access? She nodded slowly. Technically, yes. But your father meant for him to protect it, not use it. I sank into the couch, head spinning. So, legally, when he took the money, Mom looked down. It wasn't theft. It was misuse. Wrong, but not criminal. A bitter laugh escaped me. So, he ruined my life legally? Tears welled in her eyes. Your father believed in both of you. He wanted you to rely on each other. He thought Ethan would do the right thing. I pressed my palms over my face. He shouldn't have. Mom reached for my hand. Maybe not then. But maybe he saw something in Ethan that we stopped seeing. I wanted to argue, but the words stuck. Because even now, after everything, part of me still remembered the big brother who used to sneak me chocolate before dinner, who'd wait outside school to walk me home, who once swore he'd never let anything bad happen to me. Maybe Dad had seen that version too. Mom squeezed my hand gently. Ethan doesn't know I found this, but I think you should tell him. That night, I called him. Hey, heart patient, I said when he answered. He chuckled. Hey, valedictorian. Can we meet? I need to show you something. Sure, he said, curious. Coffee tomorrow? The next morning, we met at a quiet cafe near the hospital. It was one of those small places with fogged windows and the smell of burnt espresso. He looked better, cleaner, steadier, a little older in the eyes. When I handed him the envelope, his brow furrowed. What's this? Dad's will, I said. The real one. He opened it slowly, reading each line until his expression collapsed into disbelief. "I didn't know," he whispered. "Didn't know what?" "That he made me guardian. I thought Mom handled everything. I figured the account was just there, money left for you. I only saw my name on it later, and I assumed." He trailed off, voice breaking. "You assumed it was yours to use?" I finished. He nodded, ashamed. "I thought Dad left it for both of us. I swear I didn't know." I stared at him, searching for deceit, that flicker of manipulation I'd learned to expect. But it wasn't there. There was only remorse. Genuine, quiet remorse. "I ruined everything," he said softly. "And I didn't even understand what I was ruining." I leaned back in my chair. "You did. But you were also 27, not 7. You still made a choice." "I know." He looked at me, eyes tired. "You hate me less now." I hesitated. "I don't hate you at all. I just can't forget." He smiled faintly. "That's fair." Silence filled the space between us, the kind of silence that didn't sting anymore. After a moment, he said, "You ever wonder what Dad would have thought of us now?" "All the time." He nodded. "I think he'd tell me I failed you. But I also think he'd tell you that you made something beautiful out of what I broke." The honesty of it cracked something in me. "I used to dream of getting revenge," I admitted. "Of making you feel what I felt. But standing here now, I just want peace." "Then we both finally want the same thing," he said. When we left the cafe, the city was waking up, sunlight bouncing off wet pavement, traffic building, people rushing to somewhere that mattered. He walked me halfway to work, hands in his pockets, like he used to when we were kids. Before parting ways, he said quietly, "You know, I started therapy, trying to figure out why I keep breaking the things I love." I smiled. "That's a good start." He gave a small laugh. "You sound like Dad." "I'll take that as a compliment." When I got to the office, I sat at my desk and stared out the window, my reflection faint against the city skyline. For years, I defined myself by what was taken from me. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to start defining myself by what I'd built despite it. That evening, I stopped by Dad's grave for the first time in months. I brought coffee, 2 cups like we used to when I'd visit during college. "Hey, Dad," I said quietly. "Guess what? I'm doing okay. We're both trying now." I set the second cup down beside the headstone. "You were right about him. He wasn't evil, just lost. But I think he's finding his way." The wind stirred, brushing leaves across the ground. As I stood to leave, I felt something light settle inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but acceptance. Driving home, I called Mom. "You were right to show me the will." "I figured it was time," she said. How did he take it? Like someone who finally saw himself clearly. "I'm proud of you, honey." Her voice cracked, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to be the strong one. "Thanks, Mom," I whispered. "Me too." Later that night, I opened my journal. The one where I'd kept Ethan's old check folded between pages of speeches and rejection letters. I added a new note beside it. He took the money, but life gave it back in lessons. Maybe that's the kind of debt that never really needs repaying. I closed the book, feeling something I hadn't in years. Peace that didn't need proof. The strangest thing about peace is that it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with fireworks or triumphant music. It just arrives, quietly, like morning light slipping through curtains you forgot to close. After that day at the cafe, something between Ethan and me began to shift. We didn't suddenly become best friends. There were no dramatic hugs or tearful apologies after every conversation. But there was something new, an ease, a civility that hadn't existed for years. We could talk without bitterness shadowing every word. For the first time in my adult life, I could say my brother's name without feeling anger coil in my stomach. Mom noticed it too. One evening, over dinner, she smiled across the table. "You two sound normal again." I laughed softly. "I don't know if we're normal, Mom, but we're trying." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "That's all your father ever wanted." Work was steady. I'd been promoted again, now a full editor with my own small list of authors. My name started appearing in acknowledgments, which felt surreal. Every time I saw "Thank you to my editor, Amelia Hart," it made all the late nights worth it. One of my authors, an older woman named Janet Avery, once said something that stuck with me. "You edit like someone who understands pain," she told me, handing over her draft. "You don't cut, you heal." It took me a minute to reply. Maybe that's the only thing I know how to do. At home, my apartment slowly filled with signs of a real life. Photos, plants that actually stayed alive, books stacked on every surface. I'd started volunteering at a community writing program on weekends, mentoring kids who couldn't afford private tutoring. It felt good to help them the way no one had been able to help me back then. And sometimes, on quiet Saturday mornings, Ethan would stop by with bagels and coffee. He always texted first, "You busy?" as if testing the water. The first few times, I wanted to say no, but something inside me softened.
So I let him in.
He'd sit at my small kitchen table talking about his therapy sessions, his new job, the little startup projects he was helping with. It wasn't much, but it was progress. "I'm learning boundaries," he told me once, half smiling. "My therapist says I used to confuse love with control. I thought helping people meant managing them. Turns out, it just made me selfish." "That's actually very self-aware," I said, surprised. "Yeah, well," he grinned faintly, "you weren't the only one who grew up." There was something disarming about hearing him talk like that, not defensive, not self-pitying, just honest. Over time, I realized I wasn't holding my breath anymore when he spoke. A few months later, Mom organized a small family dinner, the first real one since before Dad died. Just me, her, and Ethan. I almost didn't go. The idea of sitting at that table again felt strange, like reopening a book I'd already finished. But Mom sounded hopeful when she invited me, and part of me wanted to see what family could mean now. When I arrived, the smell of roast chicken and rosemary filled the house. The same table, the same mismatched chairs, even the same crack in the kitchen tile where Ethan and I used to argue about who'd wash dishes. He was already there, helping Mom set plates. "Hey," he said, smiling nervously. "Hey." We sat, ate, talked about small things, the weather, work, movies. For once, no one brought up the past. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was calm. Halfway through dinner, Ethan lifted his glass. "To Dad," he said softly. Mom smiled. "To Dad." I raised my glass too. To Dad and to second chances. For a split second, I saw tears shimmer in her eyes. After dinner, Ethan offered to wash dishes. I joined him, out of habit. The clatter of plates and the rush of water filled the air. "You know," he said quietly, "I kept that note you left at the graduation ceremony. The one where you said, 'Sometimes the people who break us are the same ones who teach us how to stand again.'" I froze for a moment. "You kept that?" He nodded, rinsing a plate. "I read it on bad days. Reminds me that maybe I wasn't just the villain in your story." My throat tightened. "You weren't," I said softly. "You were just the obstacle." He laughed, shaking his head. "That sounds about right." We finished the dishes in silence, a comfortable kindness time. After that night, something in me settled. The part that used to ache when I thought of him was finally quiet. Still, life had a way of testing that peace. A few weeks later, my boss called me into her office. "Amelia," Linda said, leaning back in her chair. "There's a new senior editor position opening up next quarter. I'm putting your name forward." I blinked. "Seriously? You've earned it. But I won't sugarcoat it. It'll be intense. More authors, higher stakes. You'll be managing teams." I smiled nervously. "I can handle intense."
"Good," she said.
"Because you're going to be dealing with someone special for your first project, a nonfiction memoir we just acquired." She handed me a file. I scanned the cover page and my breath caught. Second Lives, a story of falling apart and finding purpose by Ethan Hart. I looked up, speechless. Linda raised an eyebrow. "You two-related?" "Yeah," I said slowly. "He's my brother." Her eyes widened. "Small world. He sent his manuscript last month. Honestly, it's good." Raw, heartfelt. But it needs refining. That's where you come in. I laughed in disbelief. You want me to edit my brother's life story?
She grinned.
Who better to tell him where the truth needs work? That night, I called him. You didn't tell me you wrote a book. He chuckled. I didn't know you'd be editing it. Neither did I. There was a pause. Then he said softly, Is that okay? I hesitated. Honestly?
I don't know yet.
He laughed gently. Fair enough. The first time I read his manuscript, I cried. Not because it was perfect, it wasn't, but because it was honest. Brutally honest. He wrote about Dad's death, about his fear of being the one left to hold the family together, about the shame of watching me succeed while he spiraled. He wrote about taking the money, not to hurt me, but because he thought success would make him worthy of being loved again. It was messy and flawed, just like him. Just like life. Editing that book became something deeper than work. It became a conversation we'd never been able to have. Not through text, not through apologies, but through words on a page. Every time I cut a line, I wrote a note explaining why. Every time he revised, he left a comment thanking me. When we finished, he sent me an email that just said, Thanks for helping me tell the truth. I replied, Thanks for finally meaning it. Months later, his book was published. The reviews were kind, not glowing but real. People called it a story of failure and grace. He called to tell me that his first royalty check wasn't much, but it felt like redemption. And then, one day, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten, no return address, just my name. Inside was a check for the exact amount he had taken from me years ago. On the memo line, he'd written, to close the chapter. I didn't cash it. I didn't need to. I framed it instead. It hangs above my desk now, a quiet reminder that healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about rewriting it so the ending belongs to you. There's something strange about hearing your own name spoken in a room full of strangers. Not like at graduation, not with applause or formality, but gently, personally, as if every syllable carries a shared history. Edited by Amelia Hart, the announcer said, his voice echoing through the bookstore's atrium. Applause filled the air, polite but warm. I smiled, a little embarrassed, nodding to a few familiar faces as I sat in the front row. The space was cozy, lined with shelves and soft yellow light. On stage sat Ethan, holding a microphone, his book Second Lives displayed behind him on a stand. It had been 6 months since its release. It was doing well, not a bestseller, but respected, appreciated read. People connected with his honesty. They wrote letters about broken families, about second chances. And somehow, my name kept appearing in those letters too, tucked in lines like, you could feel the editor's compassion in the story. Funny how healing can find its way into the smallest corners of the world. Ethan looked nervous on stage, fidgeting with the mic, smiling awkwardly. He wasn't used to attention like this. The old him would have soaked it in. The new him just seemed grateful to be here. When the host asked him what inspired the book, he paused for a long time before answering. My sister, he said simply. She's the reason I'm sitting here, and not somewhere worse. I used to think money, success, or validation defined worth. But I learned something else. Sometimes, the person you hurt most becomes the one who unknowingly saves you. The room went silent. Then a few people clapped softly. I blinked hard, my throat tight. Later, during the signing, people lined up with copies of the book. A few recognized me, whispering things like, you must be the sister, or you're Amelia, right? I smiled politely each time, answering the same way. Yes, but this was his story to tell. When the line ended and the crowd thinned, Ethan came over to where I stood by the refreshments table. He was still wearing that nervous half-smile. Well, he asked, did I embarrass you? I laughed softly. A little, but I'll allow it. He grinned. You know, I almost cut that part about the college fund. I raised an eyebrow. Why? Because it made me look terrible. You were terrible, I teased. He nodded.
Yeah.
But now it's part of the truth. Leaving it out would have been like pretending I didn't hurt you. And I can't do that anymore. There was no weight in his voice this time, no guilt trying to twist into apology, just acceptance. We stood there quietly for a moment, sipping coffee that had gone lukewarm. The air was filled with the sound of people chatting, pages rustling, the faint buzz of the city outside. He looked around the room, smiling faintly. Can you believe this? People actually care about what I have to say. I can, I said. You just needed to start telling the truth. He glanced at me, a little amused. You sound like Dad again. Good, I said. Someone has to. We laughed together, the kind of laugh that doesn't erase history but acknowledges it's behind you. After the event, we walked out into the cool night air. The city was alive, streetlights glowing, taxis honking, a busker playing guitar near the corner. Ethan shoved his hands into his jacket pockets. You know, I was thinking about that day when you walked across the stage as Valedictorian. I was standing in the back, wishing I could disappear. I looked at him, surprised by his honesty. I remember. He smiled sadly. I think that was the first time I realized I wasn't jealous. Just ashamed. There was no bitterness left in his tone, only clarity. We crossed the street in silence, the soft hum of the city wrapping around us like a lullaby. You know, I said finally, for a long time, I thought I'd never forgive you. Not because of the money, but because you made me doubt myself. You made me feel small. And when you take that from someone, it takes years to grow it back. He nodded slowly. I know. And you did. Without me. I smiled faintly. That's the point. Without you, but not against you. We walked to the river, the same one near campus, where I'd once sat years ago, crying over that empty bank account, wondering how I'd survive. The water shimmered beneath the bridge lights, moving steadily, indifferent to everything it had witnessed. I leaned on the railing, breathing in the cool air. This place feels different now. Or maybe you do, he said softly. We stood there a long time, neither of us speaking. The silence wasn't awkward anymore. It was familiar, like a pause in a song you know by heart. Finally, I turned to him. What's next for you? He shrugged. Still working at the tech firm. Thinking of writing again. Maybe something about redemption. I smiled. You've got plenty of material. He chuckled.
Yeah.
You'd probably make a better main character, though. Please, I said. I'm tired of being the lesson. He grinned. You're the proof, not the lesson. That night, when I got home, I stood by my desk, the one with the framed check above it. The same check he'd sent to close the chapter. I looked at it for a long time. Then I opened the drawer below and pulled out something else, my old graduation tassel. Faded now, the threads frayed but still holding. I hung it beside the frame. The thief's check and the survivor's tassel, side by side. A reminder that sometimes the people who break your story also help you finish it. Weeks later, the publisher hosted a small private dinner to celebrate the book's success. I gave a short speech that evening, nothing formal, just words from the heart. I used to believe betrayal was the end of something, I said, looking around the table. But it's not. It's a beginning. It forces you to see who you are when there's nothing left to lean on. For me, it was a chance to learn that forgiveness isn't about forgetting, it's about remembering without pain. People nodded quietly. Some smiled, some teared up. I caught Ethan's eye across the table. He mouthed, "Thank you." I nodded. For both of us, I mouthed back. Later, walking home under the streetlights, I realized how light I felt. Not the fleeting kind of happiness that comes from success, but the deeper kind that comes from survival, from knowing you've walked through fire and found warmth waiting on the other side. In the months that followed, I started writing again, not just editing other people's stories. Mine. It wasn't about revenge or redemption. It was about truth. About how pain doesn't have to define you, it can refine you. One evening, as I typed the last line of my own essay, I looked out the window and thought of Dad. I whispered, "You were right. We found our way back." And for the first time in years, the silence that followed didn't ache. It felt full, whole, peaceful. Because this time, my story didn't end with betrayal. It ended with becoming.